Breaking tonight, freedom under assault as terrorists take the world by storm, launching yet another deadly attack on innocent people. Plus, reports just coming in tonight that the Belgian government has now raised its terror alert level to the highest there is in the capital of Brussels, warning of an imminent threat. Welcome to the Kelly File, everyone. I'm Megyn Kelly. We are following this disturbing report out of Belgium as we learn more about an attack earlier on a hotel in the African nation of Mali. A hotel frequented by Westerners and linked to an American company. At this hour, we can confirm that a number of our fellow citizens were there at the time of the attack, and at least one of the dead is an American. The killers were heavily armed and believed to be affiliated with Al-Qaeda. Mali also happens to be a former French colony, and the nations maintain close ties to this day, making many in France feel that this was specifically meant to be an attack on their interests. Today's events, of course, follow a series of high-profile assaults by ISIS in recent days, starting October 31, when a bomb downed a Russian jetliner over Egypt. All 224 people aboard would die, including 17 children. 12 days later, another atrocity. Twin bombings tore through Beirut. 43 were killed, 200 more wounded. That attack got little attention because the very next day, the worst terror attack in French history took place. The madmen attacked restaurants, a soccer game, and a concert hall. The death toll rising today to 130. Hundreds more were hurt. And if not for the efforts of authorities, we could be discussing even more carnage, because a number of attacks have been thwarted since then. We have also seen propaganda videos promising to bring the death and destruction much closer to home. ISIS making it clear that's the ultimate goal, singling out places like Washington, D.C. and New York City. This, of course, raising alarm bells. And while authorities insist there are no credible threats at this time, we are seeing security beefed up around tourist attractions. Capitol Hill lawmakers are being told they should not be walking outside, as well as a chilling message from the FBI director saying dozens of people in the United States right now are being watched, deemed high risk for launching copycat attacks similar to what we saw in Paris. We look at all of this tonight, including what is being done to keep the homeland safe as we head into the busy holiday season, plus how all of this is now affecting the 2016 presidential contest. But we begin tonight with Trace Gallagher in our West Coast newsroom on this latest terrorist attack today. Trace?
And Megyn, terror experts say we are witnessing a bloody competition between ISIS and Al-Qaeda, and neither wants to be shown up. The attack in Mali appears to be the work, at least in part, of Al-Qaeda in the Islamic Maghreb, or AQIM, a group that is well aware of how to grab global headlines, which is why experts say they chose a U.S.-owned hotel filled with international guests. Witnesses say the gunman pulled up to the Radisson Blu in a car with diplomatic plates, got out with AK-47s, killed hotel security guards, took their weapons, and went inside shouting Allahu Akbar, or God is great. Listen.
They are jihadists. People from Bamako wouldn't do this. Those jihadists, they killed everyone, anything that was moving.
The killers apparently had studied the layout of the building and knew where certain gatherings might be taking place. Most of the bodies were found in the basement or on the second floor. At one time, 170 guests and staff were either being held inside or were trapped. Some reportedly were asked to quote from the Quran to win their freedom. Rescue forces later stormed the hotel, rushing survivors to a nearby safe house. Off-duty U.S. military personnel were among the rescue teams. Watch.
This is just U.S. Service personnel, at least one of them that I know of, who do what they do so well, which is run to the sound of guns and try to help.
The State Department says 12 Americans were in the hotel at the time. One of them was killed. The overall death toll stands at 21, including the gunman. Many French citizens were also reportedly inside the hotel, among them pilots and flight attendants from Air France. Aside from the presence of Western visitors, experts say another reason for the attack may have been that UN diplomats were staying at the hotel trying to hammer out a peace agreement in Mali to quell an ongoing civil war. Back in August, Islamist militants also attacked a hotel in central Mali, killing 13. Megyn.
Trace, thank you. Joining me now, Fran Townsend, a former Homeland Security and Counterterrorism advisor to President George W. Bush and president of the Counter Extremism Project. Fran, good to see you. And so now we've had 3 weeks of terror. That's what we've seen. 3 weeks of terror and a much more aggressive ISIS and now Al-Qaeda seeming to want to remind us of its relevance. You tell me.
Absolutely, Megyn, and I think we ought to brace ourselves for a protracted period of increased violence. 2015 has been the most violent terrorist year on record since 9/11, and that's not going to stop. I think intelligence analysts were not surprised to see Al-Qaeda try to stage this grand attack in Mali because they do want you to know they are still deadly and they're not forgotten. And let's remember, we haven't mentioned yet Al-Qaeda in the Arabian Peninsula. That's the Al-Qaeda affiliate in Yemen that the president and the administration has described as the single greatest danger to the United States. And they're operating in an unobstructed environment in Yemen because of the ongoing conflict between the Houthi and the Saudis. And so you've got these Al-Qaeda affiliates, quite deadly, quite capable, and we see the continuing rise of ISIS.
Well, you have another message from ISIS today. We've seen, 4 messages from ISIS since the Paris attacks. What does that tell you?
Well, Megyn, it's interesting to me. Obviously, ISIS had a propaganda plan for the post-Paris attack. They planned to be successful. They had these videos, clearly these messages in the can, and intended to put them out one at a time over the following week. As I've said to others in the administration, you have to take them at their word. Now, I understand that there's not what the administration is calling specific and credible threats. That means they don't have a date, a place, and a time. But the fact that they had these 4 videos ready to go threatening the United States, I would be taking pretty seriously right now.
And because what does that mean? Because we heard the FBI director come out yesterday and say there's no credible threat, there's no credible threat. And yet we're tracking all these guys and we don't have enough resources.
Well, that's exactly right. Look, it's interesting. Director Comey used some coy language. He told you that he's tracking dozens. Well, that's what I told you earlier in the week. He can track about 60 to 70, but that doesn't, and that's a couple of dozen, but that doesn't account for what about the rest of the 250 foreign fighters? What about the other 900 or so subjects of investigation that are ISIS related? If he had enough resources, something like Garland, Texas wouldn't happen, where these terrorists, they wound up getting killed because of a security guard. But they had been under the FBI surveillance and they fell off the radar because they didn't think they were that important. The FBI makes these judgments every day about what to cover because they don't have enough resources to cover them all.
And then on top of everything, on a day in which we see Al-Qaeda back at it, shooting up this hotel and hostages, and only those, we're told, who could recite the Quran were allowed to leave with their lives. You've got Secretary John Kerry, Fran, coming out today, the same day, talking about how we've neutralized Al-Qaeda. I mean, just last week, President Obama is talking about how ISIS has been contained, and then we see what we saw in France. And today, John Kerry says we've neutralized Al-Qaeda at the same time they're doing this at an American hotel in a former French colony.
Well, this from Secretary Kerry, who early in the week, made the misstatement that at least the Charlie Hebdo attack had some justification, right? I mean, so John Kerry is not exactly playing to his strength when he's making references to terrorist groups or terrorist attacks. It's clear to the American people, Al-Qaeda is not contained. By the way, ISIS is not contained. These both pose direct threats to the United States, and they've made this. The administration and the president in particular have made this big fuss about refugees, and that the Republicans and the American people seem to be afraid of 3-year-old orphans. Well, the fact is, his own director of national intelligence, James Clapper, in September said he was concerned about the threat of terrorists infiltrating themselves into the flow of refugees. So apparently, there are senior members of his own administration that worry about the very same things.
Fran, thank you.
Thanks, Megyn.